My name is Marilyn. I am 28 years old. It has been 7 months since the hurricane took everything. The sky still looks gray most days, as if it forgot how to be blue. Sometimes I wake up and still listen for the sound of the wind, the one that screamed like a wild animal that night. I remember it clearly. The sound never really left my head. Before the storm, my life was simple. I lived in a small yellow house near the coast. I worked in a bakery with my aunt. Every morning, the smell of warm bread filled the street. I used to wave to my neighbors, smile at children going to school, feed the stray cat that slept by the door. Life felt ordinary, but it was warm. Then the hurricane came and tore everything apart. When the water rose, I ran with my younger brother, Leo. He was only 16. We carried one small bag with some clothes, a bottle of water, and my mother's old photograph. The wind pushed against us, like it wanted to throw us away. Trees fell, roofs broke, and the air was full of sand and salt. I remember holding Leo's hand so tight that it hurt. We made it to the school building on the hill, and we stayed there for 2 nights until the storm passed. After the hurricane, the world felt quiet and empty. The streets were full of mud. Houses had no walls. People searched through what was left, looking for photos, clothes, anything. That still felt like life. I found the place where the bakery had been. Only the metal sign was there, half buried. I picked it up and cried. We did not know where to go next. The power was gone. The phones were dead and the roads were broken. My aunt and uncle left the town a few days later with other families heading north, but I couldn't leave. My parents had died years before, and everything I remembered of them was here: the smell of the sea, the sound of the rain on our old roof, the garden they built. I wanted to stay until I could find a reason to go. Leo wanted to stay with me, but I saw the sadness in his eyes. He missed his friends, he missed school, so after a week when volunteers came with buses, I told him to go. He didn't want to leave me alone, but I smiled and said I would follow later. I lied. I wanted him to have a chance, and I didn't know if I could survive in a new place full of strangers. Now, months later, I live in what is left of our house. The front wall is gone and the roof has holes. When it rains, I move my bed to the corner that stays dry. I cook simple meals on a small gas stove. Rice, beans, whatever the volunteers bring when they come once a month. They think I plan to leave soon. But I don't. I tell them I'm waiting for someone. Maybe I'm waiting for myself. Every evening I walk to the beach. The sand is dark now, mixed with pieces of glass and wood. I sit near the water and talk to Leo. Even though he is miles away, sometimes I imagine he can hear me. I tell him what I did that day, if I found something useful, if I saw anyone new. Talking to him makes the silence less heavy. One afternoon while walking back, I saw a small light coming from an old house at the end of the street. It surprised me because most houses had no power. I went closer. A man was sitting outside near a fire. He looked older than me, maybe in his 30s. His name was Tomas. He said he came from another town to help clean the area. He had been a teacher before the hurricane destroyed his school. Tomas offered me tea, warm and sweet. It felt strange to drink something that tasted of comfort again. We talked for a long time. He told me how he lost his students in the flood, how he could still hear their laughter when the wind blew. I told him about the bakery and my brother. We didn't say much after that. We just watched the fire. The next morning, he came to my house with some tools. He said, "We can fix the roof a little." I didn't ask him to, but I didn't stop him either. For 3 days, he worked quietly, hammering, tying ropes, cutting pieces of wood. I helped by passing him nails and holding the ladder. At night, we sat near the small fire behind the house and shared simple food. I didn't know what to call what was growing between us. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something softer, like the small light from a candle when everything else is dark. He never asked me to leave with him, and I never asked him to stay, but he did. He said the town needed someone to rebuild it, even if no one came back. I liked that he believed in rebuilding. One evening as we watched the sea, Tomas asked, "Why did you stay?" I looked at the horizon. The sun was falling behind the gray water. "Because this is where I last saw the world as it was," I said. "If I leave, maybe I'll forget it." He nodded slowly. "And your brother?" he asked. "He's safe." I said. "He sends letters through the volunteers." "He wants me to come. Will you?" "Maybe." "Not yet." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of my brother, the letters, the world outside this broken town. I thought about Tomas, about how he still believed in repairing things when so much had been destroyed. For the first time in months, I wondered what it would feel like to hope again. A few days later, I found a small bird trapped in a broken net near the beach. It was shaking, its feathers wet. I lifted it gently and brought it home. I dried it near the fire and gave it crumbs. Tomas smiled when he saw it. "You still believe in saving things," he said. I didn't answer, but I felt something move in my chest, something small and alive. The bird stayed with us for a week before flying away. On the morning it left, the sky was finally blue again. The wind was calm, the air soft. I stood outside and watched the bird disappear into the distance. I whispered, "Go where it's safe," and for the first time I felt like those words were also for me. That evening, Tomas brought a small lantern to my house. He said, "I found this in the school. It still works. You should keep it." When he lit it, the light was soft but steady. I placed it on the table beside my mother's photograph. "It's the last light I carry," I said quietly. Tomas looked at me for a long time and then said, "No, Marilyn. It's the first one you've kept alive." I didn't answer. But later that night, as I lay under the half-fixed roof and watched the glow of the lantern, I thought maybe he was right. Maybe the world was not ending. Maybe it was starting again, very slowly, like the morning after a long storm. I still don't know what tomorrow will bring. I still hear the wind sometimes. And I still wake from dreams of the sea rising again. But when I see that small light on the table, I remember that not everything was taken. Something stayed. Something worth protecting. And maybe that's what survival really means. Not fighting the dark, but keeping one light burning, even when you are the only one who can see it. Before I continue my story, please subscribe, share, and tell me where you are listening from. Your support means a lot to me. Now, let's continue. The days after Tomas gave me the lantern felt different. The air was still heavy, with salt and dust, but something inside me began to soften. I started to wake up earlier, before sunrise, to make tea and sit by the broken window. The light from the lantern still glowed faintly then, like a small star refusing to fade. Tomas would come every morning with his old backpack. Inside it were nails, pieces of wood, and sometimes food. We fixed one house after another, not because anyone would come back soon, but because he said, if they do, it should look like home. Sometimes while he worked, I watched the sea. The water had calmed, but it still carried pieces of what it had stolen. Broken doors, bottles, half a chair. I used to hate the sea after the hurricane. Now I looked at it with quiet respect. It had taken too much, yes, but it had also left me alive. One afternoon, I walked to the far end of the street where the big oak tree used to stand, only its roots remained. Near them, I found something buried under the sand, a small music box. It was rusty and wet, but when I turned the handle, it played a few soft notes. Before stopping, it was enough to make me cry. I took it home and showed it to Tomas. He smiled and said, "Music after silence, that's a good sign." That night we tried to clean it and the melody returned for a few seconds longer. It was a song I didn't know, slow and kind, like a memory from someone else's life. In the evenings, we sometimes sat outside near the fire. Tomas would talk about his old students, how one of them wanted to be a doctor. Another a writer. I told him about my brother Leo, how he used to bake with me, and laugh when the dough stuck to his hands. One night while we were eating, he asked, "Do you ever think of leaving?" I looked at the fire. "I do," I said. "But every time I imagine it, I see the town in my mind. The empty streets, the smell of the sea, the house that still stands. I feel like if I go, I'll lose something I haven't found yet." Tomas nodded. "Maybe what you're looking for isn't here, but you need this place to see it." His words stayed in my head for days. I didn't fully understand them, but I knew they meant something true. A few weeks later, a group of volunteers arrived again. They came in white trucks with blue signs and kind faces. They brought food, clothes, and letters. One of them handed me a small envelope. My hands trembled when I saw the writing. It was from Leo. I went inside to read it alone. His words were full of hope. He said he was living with our aunt in a small town 2 hours north. He was going to school again and had made new friends. He wrote, "I dream about our house, Addie. I see the sea and you sitting there. One day I'll come back for you." I cried while reading it. I missed his voice, his laughter, his easy way of making things feel okay. When I finished, Tomas was standing by the door. I handed him the letter. He read it quietly, then said, "He's growing, but he still needs his sister." I nodded. "I know, but I can't go yet." That evening, the sky turned pink and gold. The first sunset that looked alive since the storm. The colors made the sea shine like a mirror. Tomas and I stood there without speaking. It felt like something was changing, but I didn't know if it was the world or just me. Days passed. We worked, cooked, laughed sometimes. The silence between us became comfortable. But one morning when I went to look for Tomas, he wasn't there. His fire had gone cold. His tools were gone, too. I waited all day, but he didn't come back. That night I sat by the lantern, my heart heavy. I thought maybe he'd gone to another town, or maybe he couldn't stay any longer. People leave. That's what they do. Still, it hurt more than I expected. The next morning, I walked to the school. He had been repairing. On the door was a note with my name on it. The paper was folded many times, and inside it he had written, "Marilyn, if you're reading this, I had to go to the next village to help rebuild the clinic. You once told me that every light deserves a place to shine. You were right. The world is still broken, but people like you make it brighter. Don't stop carrying that light. When you're ready, come north. There's a place for you here." I read it again and again until the words blurred. I wanted to be angry that he left without saying goodbye, but I couldn't. The truth was, he had given me something I didn't even know I needed. Faith that the world could still be kind. The weeks after he left were lonely. I worked in silence, fixing things he had started. The sound of the hammer became my company. Every night I lit the lantern and watched its glow. I kept his note folded beside it. Then, one morning, the volunteers came again. They said the main road north had reopened. They were taking a few people to a safe area where there were schools, houses, work. One woman asked if I wanted to go. For the first time, I said yes. That night, I packed my small bag. Inside, I put the photo of my parents, Leo's letter, the music box, and Tomas's note. Before leaving, I stood outside the house. The sea was quiet, the sky clear. I whispered goodbye to everything. To the bakery that no longer existed, to the walls that still smelled of salt, to the memories that lived in the silence. I turned off the lantern and held it close to my chest. It felt strange, like closing a chapter. I didn't know had an ending. The journey north took hours. The roads were still broken in places, but the sight of trees and people working made me feel lighter. When we reached the town, I saw children running with books in their hands, women selling bread, men building houses. It didn't look perfect, but it looked alive. A woman led me to a small cabin near the school. "You can stay here for now," she said. I thanked her and placed my things on the table. Then I saw something that made my heart stop. The same kind of lantern as mine, burning softly in the next window. I walked outside and there he was. Tomas stood near the school fence, covered in dust and sunlight. When he saw me, he smiled. The kind of smile that comes from both surprise and relief. "You came," he said softly. I felt my throat tighten. "You left a note." I followed the light. He laughed gently and it felt like the first real sound of peace since the hurricane. He led me to the schoolyard where children were drawing on a wall with chalk. "They call this place New Haven," he said. "We're building it together." I looked around. There were gardens, clothes hanging in the sun, people sharing food. The world wasn't fixed, but it was trying, and so was I. That evening, I placed my lantern beside the others along the path to the school. It flickered softly in the wind, joining a line of small, steady lights leading into the night. For the first time since the storm, I didn't feel alone. The morning in New Haven began with bird song. It had been so long since I heard it that for a moment, I thought it was only in my head. The sound came from the trees behind the small cabin where I stayed. They were green again, full of new leaves after months of gray. When I stepped outside, the air felt different. It smelled of earth, bread, and smoke. From the cooking fires, the world was still fragile, but it was breathing again. People moved around quietly, carrying buckets of water, fixing roofs, laughing softly. I hadn't seen so many smiles since before the hurricane. Tomas was already by the school, talking to a group of children. He waved when he saw me. I walked over and he handed me a small notebook. "We're teaching them again," he said. "Reading, writing, starting from the beginning." I opened the notebook. Inside were simple words written in pencil. Hope, home, light. The children had drawn tiny suns beside them. It made me smile. "You really started over," I said. He nodded. "We all did. The storm took much, but it didn't take this." He touched his chest where the heart is. I stayed to help. Some days I cleaned the classrooms. Some days I taught the little ones how to spell. Their voices filled the air like music. In the afternoons, I baked bread for the workers. Someone had built a small oven behind the cabin, and for the first time since losing the bakery, I felt like myself again. The smell of warm bread made people stop and smile. It reminded them that life could still taste good. At night, Tomas and I sat outside by the lanterns. They lined the paths like stars fallen to earth. He told me how the town had started, how a few people came after the storm, built one tent, then another until it became a home for those who had nowhere to go. One evening as we sat by the fire, he said softly, "You know, Marilyn, I used to think light meant only the sun, but it's people like you, the ones who stay, who rebuild, who forgive the world. They're the real light." His words warmed something deep inside me. I didn't answer, but I reached for the music box I had brought. I turned the handle. The song came alive again, a few broken notes, soft and slow. The children nearby stopped playing and listened. The sound floated into the night like a gentle memory. In that moment, I realized the music wasn't sad anymore. It was tender, the sound of things healing. A few days later, I received another letter from Leo. The volunteers brought it with the morning mail. I sat under the same tree where the children studied and opened it. Carefully, "Dear Addie," it began. "I heard you went north. Aunt told me you found a new place. I'm proud of you. I knew you would help people again. I'm finishing school soon, and after that I want to come to New Haven. Maybe we can start a bakery there like before. Don't give up, okay? You always told me to keep going even when things are hard. So now I'm telling you, keep going. Addie, you carry the light." For both of us, by the time I finished reading, my eyes were full of tears, not the heavy kind that hurt, but the kind that come when the heart is full. I folded the letter and pressed it against my chest. My brother was growing, hopping, dreaming. Again, that was the light I had wanted to protect. When Tomas saw me, he didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat beside me and waited. I gave him the letter to read. He smiled quietly and said, Then we'll build a bakery. It sounded simple, but the idea made me laugh. We talked about it all afternoon. How it would smell, where we would put the oven, how the children could come for bread after class. For the first time, the future didn't scare me. It felt possible. Weeks passed and the bakery slowly took shape. People brought what they could, bricks, pieces of metal, old tools. Tomas helped me fix the walls, and I painted a sign from memory, the little loaf. It was the same name as my aunt's bakery, the one by the sea. When we baked our first batch of bread, the whole town came. The smell filled the air, and laughter spread like sunlight. A woman said it reminded her of home. Little boy said it was the first warm meal he'd had in months. I looked around and saw faces full of life, not pain. That night, I lit my lantern in the window, not to keep the dark away, but to show others that this was a place of warmth. Later, as I stood outside watching the stars, Tomas joined me. "Do you still miss your town?" he asked. "I do," I said, "but I think I've brought it with me in. The bread in the sea wind and the light." He smiled. "Then you didn't lose it. You carried it here." For a long moment, we stood in silence. The world around us was still broken in places, but the air felt full of peace. Somewhere far away, the waves were still touching the shore. That night, I took out my mother's photograph and placed it beside the lantern. The glow touched her face softly, as if she were there watching. I whispered, "We made it, Mom." The next morning, the sky turned gold. Again, the children ran through the yard laughing. People worked together, planting gardens, building walls, sharing food. Life was not easy, but it was alive, steady, quiet. Real. I no longer feared the storm. It had changed me, yes, but it had also given me something precious. The understanding that love doesn't die in disaster. It hides, waits, then grows again in the smallest places. When I walked through the town that evening, lanterns lit the path on both sides. Each house had one, some small, some bright, all glowing. The whole street shimmered like a river of light. I stopped in the middle and looked around. The wind was gentle. The people were singing. I thought of my brother, my parents, Tomas, and everyone who had stayed through the darkness. And then I understood what the last light I carry really meant. It wasn't the lantern or the fire. It wasn't even the sun. It was the courage to love again after loss, to believe again after fear. It was the small, quiet flame that lived in the heart and refused to go out no matter how long the night. I looked at the lantern shining in the dark and whispered to the world, "This is home." And for the first time since the hurricane, I felt truly